talk about that in just a moment. But the big reason that I'm here this week is that I am an AE master teacher for Project Lead the Way. This is my 9th year teaching Project Lead the Way, my 8th year teaching AE, and this is my 7th year as a master teacher for AE. And that's, it's kind of just, I guess, touting my bona fides as drinking the Kool-Aid with the PLTW. Definitely love it, definitely here to save the world. And I am doing the CyberAuto challenge because, again, I do see it as a way to help our kids find that pathway to, sort of some of the stuff that Vince is talking about, where he really emphasizes this idea of doing stuff that the kids love, doing stuff that we love, but also getting paid for it. I don't know how many of you maybe were in San Antonio, but during his general talk in San Antonio, and he may have given the same one today. Unfortunately, I had something I had to take care of, so I was not at the general section today. But he, repeated that I don't remember who said it, but if you're doing something you love but you're not getting paid for it, it's called a hobby. And certainly hacking into cars and learning about computers and learning about automobiles, a lot of us have that as a hobby. But if we can give our kids a pathway to doing that where they can get paid, pretty well for it, why shouldn't we? And so that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. Downside is this is pretty much a walk and talk on my part. I absolutely do want to field questions, which is why we're here in person. So if at any point anything needs clarification or you're interested in it, pop a flare and we'll take care of that, or write it down and save it. But I do want to make sure that we address any questions on your part. So we'll go ahead and begin. The event this year is the week of the 21st through the 26th of July. It is just north of Detroit. So for ease, we do say either Detroit or it's in Warren, Michigan. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So here's my contact info real quick. david.quinton.schein@gmail.com. And here's my cell phone number. Certainly feel free to reach out to me by cell phone if anything comes up, after the conference. You're like, hey, this needs to be answered immediately. Or if you need to reach out by email, that's great. The website for the event, the SAE website, is sae.org. sae.org/events/CyberAuto. Come on in, got plenty of seats. Just flashy picture. So the CyberAuto Challenge is a week-long, 5-day workshop. We get started on Sunday, but we really dig in around on Monday morning. It's a 5-day workshop, and it is practicum-based, meaning that it is hands-on. It's not just the kids, sitting in a classroom learning about stuff, and then we say, oh, okay, cool, that's cars, bye. The classroom discussion and classroom experiences, because there are classroom experiences that they go through, because we're not just going to say, here's a car, go do things. We have to actually teach them how to do and what to do on the cars. We are using real cars. We're not using bench models or bench setups, which we do typically have a couple of those available for them to experiment with, but those are not the primary target. The primary target are the actual automobiles. And these are actual automobiles that you could literally go to a store and sign a contract and drive away with. These are the equivalent of the cars that some of you may have rented this week. These are the equivalent of some of the cars that some of you may have even gone to a store and purchased in the past. A few years ago, the delivery of the vehicle that we were supposed to be working on got messed up. We're not sure what happened, but they said, okay, cool, go down the street to the dealership and tell them who you are. They will have a car ready for you. And we literally went down the street to a dealership and they just handed us keys, and obviously there were several pieces of paper that were signed, but it was a car that was otherwise going to be sold. And so the dealer and the OEM, they worked that out. By the way, OEM, that's a word that I'm going to use quite a lot during this. OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. That refers to the car company. So the name of the car, the badge that's on the hood of the car or on the trunk of the car. I will probably not, despite whatever you say, I will probably not use any of those names, because on the one hand, I've got a pretty hefty NDA that I don't want to have to comport with. But on the other hand, I don't want to imply that we're dealing exclusively with one car company or another. We are actually dealing with several, which is really phenomenal, and I'll get into that in a moment. But also, I don't want to imply that this only applies to one individual OEM or another. This is, the stuff that we're doing is about all of the OEM, it's about the entire automotive industry, and the entire automotive industry is really excited about this event, which is truly phenomenal and wonderful. Real equipment, what I mean by that is we are working, here's a name that I can say, Intrepid Control Systems has been one of our sponsors for the last couple of years, and they have been a phenomenal partner in supporting the students who have been participating in this event. Insofar as the last 3 years, I believe, they have actually given to all of the participating students a connecting cable that allows them to go from USB to interface with the automobiles. That's a value of about $150 for that particular item. They also make an item that's about $5,000 that they have a box of them, and they're like, here, let's go and use these. They have items that are about $250, and they're like, here's a box of them, just go and use these. And they also give the kids a license to use the software, and that license is about $1,500. And again, the kids who participate in this, it's like, here, cool, go do things, just have fun. Go learn stuff and go save the world. So again, real equipment. This is not, we're not forcing them to make their own stuff out of microcontrollers that they download off the internet. This isn't stuff that we hacked together. This is, now granted, some of it is cobbled together to make cables and things like that, just because we have to interface with the vehicle. But this is real deal stuff, and they're interfacing with real deal people in the industry, actual subject matter experts who are kind of the top of the game, and it's really phenomenal that these students are able to get FaceTime with these individuals. They are also able to work with the engineers from the OEM, because each of the participating OEM, not only do they pay to be there, they also send engineers, some of whom worked on that vehicle in terms of designing that electrical infrastructure. And they also are bringing, those engineers are bringing the tools from the OEM. So again, they're working with the actual real deal stuff. On that end, there's no corners being cut on that. And real communications protocols. They're actually interfacing with these vehicles. The modern automobile has about 40 to 70 computers in it, depending on what features it has and depending on what type of drivetrain it has. And those computers historically have been communicating on a thing called CAN, which is Controller Area Network. And there's a protocol for how CAN devices talk to each other. Our participants actually hop on to the network, listen to traffic that's being distributed, contribute their own communication into that network, and talk to those controllers. And that's all hacking is getting something to do something it wasn't designed specifically to do. And so by interrupting that transmission, that's the definition of hacking. And so that's directly what they're doing. There are some communication protocols on the horizon that are being explored and sort of delved into by some of our OEM, and we're going right along with that. So as needed, we take our kids there too. And it's really, again, it's future forward. In the garage, we have industry experts. We have folks who, again, they train, some of the folks who are in the garage literally train folks who work for the OEM to do these things. And the OEM call these people in to say, hey, we need you to help us do this thing or figure out this thing. And they're like, I can't this week. I'm going to save the world. And they come play with us for a week. We have government folks in the garage. We need that. And one of the things that we have to press with our kids, even some of our kids who are like, damn the man, save the empire, is the fact that the bottom line is, in order for all of our cars to work, all of this infrastructure that we have in terms of logistics, getting stuff from Long Beach to Baltimore, we do need to have these government partnerships. We need to have these government rules. California has already way ahead of the game in terms of rules about driverless automobiles. That's phenomenal. And a lot of other states, on the other hand, are going almost in an opposite direction, where they're extremely hesitant to really deal with the idea of autonomous or semi-autonomous vehicles. And unfortunately for those states, that's not the direction things are headed in. So there's definitely a big conversation about that. We also have to have the conversation about privacy in terms of, with these vehicles talking to each other in order to operate in an autonomous or semi-autonomous way, how does that vehicle look on an electronic map? Because when the infrastructure is set up and it's tracking and it's trying to make sure that the cars that are moving are actually cars and not some kind of spoof, how do I make sure that I'm not tracking Philip here and saying, all right, here's Philip going on, every day at 9 o'clock, Philip takes a right at this intersection. What's going on with Philip? That's creepy, right? So people are obviously concerned about that, and that is a genuine concern. That is not just here in the United States. And quite frankly, if you talk to just about any privacy expert, Europe is a little bit ahead of us in terms of a lot of just general privacy stuff. So we are partnering, of course, with Europe. You guys familiar with the hats? The hat lingo, white hat, black hat. Anybody not familiar with that? Okay, super quick and dirty on the hats. What you're familiar with when people say hacker is typically the image of what we call a black hat hacker. That's somebody who's breaking into stuff to steal information and sell it to somebody else for a profit. They are unethical. The whole idea of doing that is unethical and no bueno. On the opposite end of the spectrum is what we refer to as a white hat hacker. The white hat hacker is somebody who has been typically hired by a company to perform a hack, and hey, this thing is broken, or this thing is not working the way we want it to, can you figure out what's going on, or do something like that. So quite often they actually work for a company. This is typically somebody who's receiving a regular paycheck or is a contractor under contract to do this hacking job. In the middle, you get what's called a gray hat, because white and black is gray. Gray hat hackers typically are not necessarily under contract, and they are breaking into stuff quite often without explicit permission to do so, but either they then go and sell that or even just give that information to the company that they've hacked and say, hey, you have a problem with your product. I found this problem with your product. Here is all of my documentation about your product. Good luck. That's pretty ethical. Generally speaking, that's an okay thing. To what we call hacktivists. Hacktivists, at the very least, think they're doing a good thing. They're somewhat on the darker end of the gray hat, but they're quite often not selling what they find, but quite often they are still, nevertheless, releasing information to the public about what they perceive as a public danger. They're not saying, breaking into some router system and saying, oh, look, you can get this router if you pay me $100,000. they're saying, this is some pretty sketchy stuff. If they don't fix this, bad things could happen. So that's your gray hat. Red hat, on the other hand, are typically similar to white hat, and they're specifically hired by companies to be penetration testers, infiltration teams. An OEM may say, here, you are our special team, you're our red hat team, we don't tell you anything about what our other group is doing when they design our computer, but before we send it out to market, we give you our vehicle and we say, we want you to smash this thing. And we want you to find every problem you can find with it so that you can send that information back to us in the same company, and somebody else will walk it down the hallway. So you're isolated from that. So those are the 4 major hats. Cool? And then basically what the week is, what the culmination of the week is that they plan and perform an attack on the vehicle. They get into it. And again, these are full feature cars. These are modern, top of the line. Well, by top of the line, I mean they didn't go in and strip them. These are, you could walk down the street, you could find them, walk off a car lot with them. These aren't specially prepped for us. Like, ooh, the kids are gonna hack them. Here you go. Let's make it easy. And some of them have been really hard. So it's pretty fun. In terms of the value for the kids, probably the #1 value for the kids is giving an increased awareness of what, oh man, that shouldn't have come up yet, sorry. Oh, that's exciting, sorry. Increased awareness of what's going on with the vehicle, increased number of interfaces. So as time has gone on, we have gone from just jacking in hardwire to we're now pushing multiple wireless entry points because that's the direction that the vehicles are going in. Vehicles are becoming more wireless, and as a result, we need to be doing that ourselves. That cooperative relationship building. Students aren't just helping the organizations, those organizations are helping the kids. These kids are getting, we have had students, and I'll talk about one in particular later, have gotten jobs directly from this program. Many of these students have gotten scholarships or have gotten direct references to help them get positions in colleges. Some of them have gotten internships. Some of them are working for military and other government institutions now as a direct result of 5 days in Detroit. And so these two are really kind of related in terms of exposure. This is an ugly, ugly slide. I am so sorry about this.
Could be common sense.
By myself, really. Yeah. So, yeah, I've pretty much already said this stuff. The bottom line is, this has led directly to some really amazing opportunities for these kids in terms of college and workforce. And really, college is just a pathway to the workforce. At least we should see it that way. Cool. This is basically what we just said. I'm not really sure why I'm repeating the slide. I'm sorry about that. So we talk about security. Okay, so we do talk about general security approaches. So some of these students may not necessarily have a future in automotive security, but may have an interest or a future in just general security, and this certainly addresses that. There are certain cybersecurity issues that are unique to the automotive environment, separate even from your standard computer environment. So we obviously, they learn about that, they grow from that. We certainly increase their skill in CAN protocols and programming because, of course, that's the area that we're working in. But this is nevertheless applicable. Some of those strategies are applicable to general cybersecurity and general security. We teach them the theory, we teach them the practical. They develop, this is a really fun thing. We have a hard deadline. Friday at noon, we kick them out. Really, it's Friday morning at about 4 a.m. We say, I don't care what you're doing, you need to stop because we need to pack it up because we need to leave by Friday at noon. Friday before noon, these cars are gone. So you've got nothing left to work on. They give presentations Friday morning, everything, we're out of there. They've got their hackathon all day Thursday, which we'll talk about in a minute. But from Monday through Wednesday, really, we teach them how to do all this stuff, and they put together a plan, and then Wednesday afternoon, they start working on the car in earnest. All day Thursday, they're working on the vehicle, and so they've put together a plan, and they need to know, how do I work with a team? How do I put together a plan to take on this beast? And then actually put that into action in a very limited time frame. And that's a pretty good set of skills that they then take that and they use that on an application, even with somebody who wasn't in that garage with them, seeing them work. But they're able to say, hey, this is what I did this week. That sounds really good in an interview. Team working, not just with their peers, but also with adults, engineers, some of whom have scholarly experience, most of whom don't. And so they get the opportunity to work with folks who are from wildly different backgrounds from themselves. It's a pretty mind-blowing experience. And then of course they develop these relationships. And yeah, it's fun. They get to do this thing that they don't get to talk about. It's pretty cool. The participant, yeah. It's really weird when you go to a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old and you're like, hey, I need you to sign this NDA that your parents also need to sign that basically says what happens in Detroit stays in Detroit. And they're like, okay, so I'm gonna do this mind-blowing thing, but I can't talk about it. And you're like, yes. And they're like, cool. Yeah, the enthusiasm with which a child signs an NDA is really interesting.
And then they tell everybody about it.
They tell everybody about the fact that they can't tell anybody about it.
That's just as good.
Which is, oh, it's great for me. It's great from my perspective. Yeah, which is why they're so excited about it. We have a couple of schools that have sent us applicants every year for the past, well, like I said, we're in our 7th year. We had a couple colleges and high schools participate in the first year, and they've had a pretty decent number of applicants every single year. And one of the kids a couple of years ago said, yeah, so-and-so from last year just kept talking about this thing in, comp sci, and he was like, but I can't tell you about it. Like, man, that makes sense, because that kid would say that. But it's cool, and if that's the hook that we need to get a kid to apply, and that's the hook that gets this kid an internship or a college application leg up, or a scholarship, or a job, take it. This next slide is much more geared toward our professional team members. It says basically the same thing, just from the other perspective, because there are some phenomenal benefits to the professional team members, but since that's not really the audience that we've got here, I'm just gonna slide on through that. But again, the bottom line is, the thing that we push for their participation is they're hiring their future workforce. We have huge numbers of engineers out in the workforce today who have served their time and or are from a previous paradigm. And that's one of the weird things that a lot of people just don't get. There's technology out there today that was science fiction 20 years ago. And our interface, and just think about our students, the notion of the cell phone. The cell phone's 10 years old, folks. The iPhone, 11 years now. The iPhone was 11 years old. science fiction is now completely ubiquitous. The integration of this into our cars, Apple and Android integration into our vehicles, other certainly companies doing stuff in the head units. This is not stuff that is going away, but for a lot of us, this takes a lot of brain power for us to really deal with while we're driving. For some of our kids, right now it does, but in the next few years, maybe it won't because of how heavily integrated their other stuff is. The Internet of Things is changing the way our children interface with the world. And most of us aren't going to make that transition the same way. We're watching it happen, we're not happening with it. So these kids need to be the ones who are making these vehicles for the other kids. And I know that's scary because I've met some of our kids, but that's literally the thing that has to happen. There is a paradigm shift, and most of us, quite frankly, we're just too old to learn the language. This is what the week basically looks like. It is crammed full of awesome. We do gather on Sunday. In Sunday evening, we have basically a party with the kids. One of Detroit's finest. The last couple of years, Little Caesars has actually donated some food to us for our Sunday evening pizza party. Little Caesars was founded in Detroit, and we reached out to them and said, "Hey, we're trying to save the world." They're like, "So are we," and so that worked out really well. And then on Monday, as you can see, we start off with a little "Hey, welcome." We spend a little bit of time talking about legal and ethics. We talk about the laws surrounding hacking into vehicles. It may seem weird, but quite frankly, most of the hacking that one might do on a vehicle is perfectly legal. Not just legal, but it is heavily protected. Your right to work on your own car is heavily protected. It's a thing called right to repair. It is illegal for a manufacturer to make it impossible for you to work on your car, to fix your car. It is illegal for them to make it a situation where you have to go to them to repair your vehicle. However, there are some interesting legal situations going on right now, which you can certainly Google on your own later, where certain manufacturers are fighting back by saying, but this software to make this thing run, if you go in and you modify this software, the thing won't run anymore. So we don't want you doing that because then you'll bring this thing back to us and say that it's our fault, but it's not our fault, it's your fault. But the back and forth goes on and is actually on its way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and IP also, so the intellectual property. So like if we let you in and you can play with it, then you can see what we did.
Yep.
So,
and they don't like that. The secrecy around this stuff at the OEM level is nightmarish. The fears and concerns and historically supported reasonable fears about intellectual theft, intellectual property theft, and industrial espionage. It's completely supported by history. They've been doing this to each other for over 100 years, and really since before the automobile was invented. So the idea that we have a garage where last summer we had 5 different OEM set up next to each other, and we're teaching kids how to hack into cars and giving kids the opportunity to talk to each other about what they're finding, and these OEM are like, cool, go to it, is mind-blowing. And we are super stoked about it. And the only reason that we're able to do that is we're doing it right. And we are really hammering these kids about the ethics. So when you go back to your schools and you tell your kids about this, which I want you to do, which is the whole reason you're in this room, is so that you can recruit for me. When you recruit and when you're talking to your kids, if you've got a kid who's on the fence, that kid who's maybe that gray hat who's like, hey, here's some, folks doing some shady stuff that this is kind of cool, but here's also some folks doing some really cool stuff that's really cool, and you think that we can save them and pull them over to the light, go ahead and send them to us. That's all right. we'll give that a shot. If you've got a kid who already is showing absolute strength in ethics, bring them on, absolutely. If you've got a kid who you know is going to use this for evil, and you know the kid, you all have had at least one who every time they get their hands on anything weird, they're like, oh dude, I bet I could blow up my sister's Barbies with this. No dude, that's not what we use rocket engines for. Like, that's not why I'm teaching you aerospace. I don't want that kid in my garage. And I'm not saying that anybody's too far gone, you know, but quite frankly, you know the kids that shouldn't apply.
So prereqs, are you looking for, because if I'm just looking at July, so are you looking for seniors that just graduated? Or are you interested also in juniors that could make it?
I do actually address that in just a couple slides, but I'll go ahead and answer it now. We are ideally looking for rising juniors through anybody who's still in school, because we do also accept college kids. But ideally rising juniors and seniors in terms of high schools. Anybody here with higher ed? No? Okay, so then I guess the college part doesn't matter. But if any of you working on your master's or PhD? Yeah, tell your colleagues, if you have any colleagues in your master's programs who are interested in this, because if they're in college or taking a PhD, they could still apply. If they're in school, they can still apply. Teachers, I'm sorry. Let's see. It is absolutely immersive. You can see this is a really heavy schedule. The only downtime that they really have is this, well, that they had, because we actually got rid of this, was, we used to take them on, do these kind of field trips, and the first couple of years, the field trips were really mind-blowing. Then we did a couple field trips that were really cool, but we had to scrimp on some other experiences, including time on the car. And so we decided, nah, let's give them more time on the car. So now this stuff is kind of crammed into here, and we get more of the vehicle time on, starting on Wednesday, even as early as lunchtime for that. Give them as much time as possible to attack the vehicles is really the goal. And then you can see all day Thursday, and that really is, lunch at 7 or breakfast at 7. Hack, lunch, hack. Start running buses if they're starting to fall asleep. And we've had kids who have worked until 4 or 5 in the morning, doing really cool stuff. And they go back to the dorms, grab their stuff, come back, and give a presentation on what they did, just to the limited group of people that were there. It's really fun stuff. One of the reasons that we have this very intensive schedule is the initiator, the dream maker for this whole experience is a former Army guy, and he definitely brings some of what he learned to this, and he's a really intense. He's a really intense guy, and he has found a great deal of benefit in stress. And when we put our students in a position where they are stressed and they are pushed to their limits, most of the time, especially if we support them properly, they come through. And there's tremendous growth. And there is an amazing amount of camaraderie and just joy and beauty that comes with that. And we don't see that if we don't push them. And so part of what we're trying to do here is really push them to that limit to really build those connections. And those connections have proven to build and have proven to be long lasting, which is really awesome. You can see we've got some little pictures of folks. Oh wow, okay, yeah, it's literally the next slide. So the target audience is juniors and seniors in high school plus anybody in college that's undergrad or postgrad. And just because a student isn't necessarily a junior or senior doesn't mean they can't apply. So if you've got that freshman or sophomore, well, the sophomore's going to be a rising junior, but if you've got that freshman right now who's really excited about that, maybe hears about this and says, "Oh my God, this is super awesome! I really want to do it. Please give me, please give me the URL." Quite frankly, even if you don't give them the URL, they're going to research it and they're going to find it as soon as they hear about it, because we've already had an application from a freshman, and this kid looks awesome. Like, this kid's resume is pretty rad. We'll talk more about the application process in a moment, but there's no reason to say no. There really isn't. Unless you've got like an 8-year-old, in which case, no. I need to move these pictures. I'm really sorry about this. This is really frustrating. So the vehicle teams. We've got the vehicle itself, of course. We have the OEM engineers. So the OEM pays us a bunch of money and says, "Hey, we want to give you a car to break," because once we touch it, they can't sell it, like by law. So they're like, "Hey, here's a bunch of trash. Go do something with it." But they also bring along some engineers with them, which is really cool. Again, some of whom have actually worked on this vehicle. Others just work in that division. But the bottom line is these aren't just interns from some OEM. These are actually folks who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about, and are able to help the kids resolve some of the problems. And we work with them, and it's pretty cool seeing them, especially some of the returning ones, who are able to say, "Okay, nope, I brought with me some stuff to help the kids when they run into the problems, but you don't get it yet, kids. You have to work on it." And it's pretty neat. It's like our own students, where we wait to figure out when we suggest how about you turn it counterclockwise. We also have other suppliers. So your tier one suppliers are your big name brands that probably all of you have heard about, the electronic brands that actually make the computers that go into the vehicles. Your tier twos you've probably never heard of. They make some of the smaller parts that go into vehicles, or they make parts that the tier ones use to then go into their parts that they put into the OEM. Because an OEM doesn't make those computers. They don't make the brakes. They don't make hell, sometimes they don't make the axles or anything like that. They put together parts. And so there's a bunch of people in there. And so the suppliers, we're gonna have one or two of them on a team. SME, subject matter experts, they're typically floaters, but some of them are sometimes embedded on the teams. And of course, where are you? Nope. There are some people who are in related industries who have paid to be there in the garage with us, and those will be embedded on the team. The people who are embedded on the team are either on the team because they are contributing some level of knowledge and support, or they're on the team to learn what we're doing to take that back to their corporation because they're benefiting from this experience. So again, it is bi-directional. And in these technical subject matter experts, those are also where we would have our independent researchers.